Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast daily. I'm Bill Landis. That's Jeremy Birmingham. It's the final weekend of June. How excited are you that the month is almost over and all these official visits and the camps and all the recruiting shenanigans might cool off at least for a little bit after this weekend?
It's actually weird because it's not the final weekend of June. There's still one more left, but it is the final recruiting weekend of June because of the dead period. Right. That starts on Sunday evening. Every Ohio State coach just seems to be like getting out of town like ASAP. Like everyone, when that last recruit leaves on Sunday afternoon, like those doors are getting locked and everyone is just on the road. Before we do that, it's my 5th wedding anniversary. So happy anniversary to my wonderful wife today. I'm excited for this weekend because we're heading down to Columbus and we're going to get to watch the Zach Bryan concert, Turnpike Troubadours, Billy Strings, Charles Wesley Godwin. Like this is going to be a banger of a show in the shoe on Saturday. So everything else that happens this weekend is secondary to that in my mind. But for Ohio State, this weekend feels like the culmination of like everything they've been working for on the recruiting trail for the last 6 months. And maybe that feels like it's slighting some of the other guys that have already committed or already been in town throughout the month, especially that first weekend of June where there was Dorian Moore, Justin Hill, some top targets. But Tavien St Clair, as of recording this, I mean, he's right. It seems like on the precipice of winning the Elite 11. We'll see if he can hold off, Deuce Knight and a couple other guys out in California and bring home the title for Ohio State. He's coming to town for his official visit. We'll have Devin Sanchez, Naeem Offord, David Sanders, Jordan Davison, Dorian Brew. This is a weekend for Ohio State that has some really interesting side discussions, people we really haven't talked about a lot, like guys like Malik Autry, the defensive tackle committed to Auburn, who, over the last few months, it's been really, really hard to sort out what Larry Johnson's board looks like. But it has not been hard to glean in the last 2 weeks that Malik Autry is priority number 1 for Ohio State at defensive tackle in the class of 2025. And when you look at the guy who's 6'6", 320 pounds, you can understand why. Unfortunately, if he goes out the backyard and hits a golf ball over his fence, he hits Auburn's campus, which is where he's committed. So it's not going to be easy. But his good friend, Zion Grady, another Alabama prospect, will be in town. I mean, we have 3 players from Alabama making official visits to Ohio State in this final weekend of the June recruiting calendar, which feels insane, to be honest. And then we have the cooler, the stories that the prodigal son type things like Dorian Brew, who was going to commit to Ohio State in January, had his commitment graphics all done and all that stuff, decided to pull back when it looked like Ohio State was going to have 3 cornerbacks committed, which, Naeem Offord committed 10 days after Dorian Brew was expected to, but Perry Eliano was moved on from Ohio State. And there was a lot of transition for a kid that had just recently moved back to Texas. And so now the last 6 months, it's felt like Ohio State was in a chase position. First, it was LSU and Texas. Then it was Texas A&M. Now it's USC and Oregon. And now it's Texas again trying to pull off a coup. USC trying to get any recruit to stay committed on defense. So and Ohio State will get the last shot. And then you have Jake Cook, Ohio offensive lineman from Westerville North High School, who got his offer from Ohio State last Saturday night after a pretty compelling story over the last 2 months, which we love to tell. I think, he decommitted from Louisville on Tuesday. When he did that, everyone sort of assumed what's next, and we expected he'll be committed to Ohio State by Monday, I'd imagine. And it's weird though, Bill, because when you go into this weekend, I talked about this with Andrew on Talking Stuff, Ohio State could lock up Jordan Davison this weekend, and maybe he'll make a decision really early. That's probably Ohio State, Oregon, with Michigan right there on the outside looking in. They could lock up Dorian Brew. They could get a big time third commitment from another cornerback that they love. But if things don't go the right way with David Sanders, the 5-star offensive tackle from North Carolina, and if they can't seal the deal there, nothing else seems like it's going to matter for people. And that sucks because there's still other good things happening. I'm not saying that people should be prepared for that by any stretch, but I feel like there is a mindset almost that if Justin Fry can't seal the deal with David Sanders, that everything else feels like it's not a win. And it's hard to, I get it in some ways because I know why people are on edge about offensive line recruiting and have been for a couple of years, but like there's still a lot of good things happening for the number one ranked class in the country.
Yeah, and so I asked some of our tech subscribers for some recruiting questions. We're going to get to those on this episode. This is going to be a recruiting episode, if that hasn't been painfully obvious already. So there's a lot of offensive line questions. We're gonna get to those later. There's some questions about some other stuff. We actually are. You mentioned Jake Cookburn. We're going to have Jake on this show too for a few minutes to talk a little bit about the process leading up to getting the Ohio State offer and his visit this weekend. So we're looking forward to that as well. I do want to ask you though, like stick a pin in kind of all that stuff, because you mentioned Tavien St Clair is out at the Elite 11 and doing very well out there from everything that we can tell. Is there a chance that he ends up the number one overall player in this class? Like, could you see a road to that standing for him?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's actually he's maybe not on that road right now, but I think he's like packing his bags for that road, and he's like called his Uber, and they're waiting to pick him up, because what we've seen out of Tavien, like I think 247 Sports has him as the number 2 ranked player in the country right now.
They do, yes, yeah.
And what is he? He's number 28 on On3, number 2 at 247, number 48 on ESPN, who does not matter, and number 11 with Rivals. The thing about Tavien is that he went and competed at the Rivals camp. He went and competed at the Elite 11. If he wins the Elite 11, that is a differentiator. Like the guy that he's been chasing for most of the cycle is Bryce Underwood from Belleville, Michigan, who's committed to LSU, another quarterback. Probably the only quarterback in the class that is anywhere near the physical maturity of Tavien. Maybe George McIntyre, committed to Tennessee, could be in that conversation as well. But George had to sit out the Elite 11 because of a hand injury. So he's out. And if Tavien wins this Elite 11, when you look at everything else he's done, the body of work over the last year and a half, the way he looks, and that's really the biggest thing. People are getting a chance nationally to see him for the first time. And we've been ahead of the curve. We've seen the development from the time he was a 6'3", 175-pound freshman to now. And so, we've tried to talk about it and be like, holy crap, this is crazy how different he looks. But for national folks, they're seeing him for the first time and they're like, oh my goodness, this is an NFL ready quarterback physically already. And then when he gets out there and throws the ball and people see the natural mechanics and the very like repeatable throwing motion and the ease of which he moves and the accuracy for a kid of his size, like he does so many things well, and is committed to Ohio State as the quarterback. So, I mean, is there a chance? Yes, 100%. There's not a player like a Jeremiah Smith in this class that maybe from a non-quarterback position that you think could usurp the quarterback until Jakeem Stewart reclassifies in November, the defensive tackle from New Orleans. I think maybe if that happens, you could see Jakeem Stewart be reclassed into the number 1 spot. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens, but it seems fairly likely otherwise that it's going to be a quarterback, and Tavien certainly has as good a claim to that as anybody else. I mean, he's earned it, and that's the thing I like about what we've seen out of him. He's gone out and competed and earned it, and not left any doubt that he's capable of being that guy.
Yeah, I envision a scenario where people got eyeballs on him for the first time in a while, or maybe the first time ever, and came to the realizations that I think you and I and a lot of people around here did a long time ago, that this kid is a rather impressive quarterback prospect. And in a world, like you said, where there's not a consensus number 1, I'm starting to think that maybe he does have a path to being the closest thing to that. We'll see. Yeah. We'll see how it develops.
And the best thing about Tavien is just that the last 2 weeks, I mean, he was at Ohio State camping 3 different times. I mean, the kid is not approaching this like we've seen a lot of other 5-star quarterback types approaching. Like I was talking to his head coach at Bell Fountain, Jason Brown, on Tuesday at Ohio State for their 7-on-7 camp, where Tavien's little brother Rain was handling the offense for Bell Fountain, who did a great job, by the way, for a kid going to be a freshman. Like really was pretty good. And Coach Brown said, is this the easiest 5-star quarterback recruitment in the history of 5-star quarterback recruitments? And I can't think of one easier. And like, that's why it's so important for Ohio State to have players like that in the state of Ohio every once in a while. Like Brian Hartline, for as good as he's been as a recruiter, and we're talking about maybe the most prolific 5-year run of any individual assistant coach I've ever seen, every single recruitment is a dogfight to keep the best of the best around the country away from your guy. And so the value for Tavien to being an in-state quarterback and the opportunity to get to Ohio State, come in like he did during spring ball and spend the entire week in meetings with Chip Kelly, like there's tons of value for him there and his development. But for Ohio State, like it allows you to take a breath in a way that they have not been able to take a breath on quarterback recruiting since God knows when. When was the last time it was? Doesn't even have to be like a 5-star quarterback. When was the last time they had a cycle at quarterback that was easy?
I don't know that they've ever had one. Yeah, so it's nice to have a guy like that in your backyard, no doubt. We'll leave that there for now. We will take a quick break and be right back here on the Podcast Daily. We will be joined by Jake Cook ahead of his official visit to Ohio State this weekend. Back here on the Podcast Daily, Bill Landis, Jeremy Birmingham, joined by Jake Cook. He's a 2025 offensive lineman, from Westerville North, recently offered by Ohio State, getting ready to take his official visit there this weekend. Jake, we appreciate you joining us. I want to ask you, you have been to Ohio State, I don't know, more than some students who are already enrolled at Ohio State. You just visited Ohio State a whole lot. So what is their priority then when you go on an official visit? I know those are different. I know they kind of blow it out for you guys and do some cool things, but like what's on your list of things you'd like to get accomplished this weekend as you go up there?
Definitely just obviously getting a better feel. Obviously I already have a good feel for Coach Fry's coaching style, but just more position meetings with him, see how he interacts with the players and stuff, and then obviously just get tighter with the players. I know a couple kids on the team, especially O-line wise, but really getting a chance to hang out with them will be fun. And just being around the recruits and families and just talking with the coaches some more. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Jake, from a student perspective, you had been committed to Louisville from February. I assume, over the last 4 months, you had started to look into academic programs at Louisville, what you were going to study. And do you have to immediately begin changing your mind and finding a different area of study? Do you start looking at different majors at Ohio State? Do they have the same thing that you're looking for? And how much academic focus do you look forward to getting some clarity this weekend? Because as Bill said, you've been to Ohio State a lot, but I don't know that you've really been through a lot of the full comprehensive visits.
Yeah. So I was talking with Murph the other day about kind of just stuff that I'm looking into, and that's definitely a huge thing for me is checking out the academics over there, seeing what they do. So I'm into the business side, so I think I'll probably be majoring in that. So I'll probably be looking forward to that stuff.
What is it about the business world that interests you? You're an aspiring entrepreneur or what?
I mean, I kind of I'm going to do a business just to have, because I think that's just something everybody should have under their belt. I mean, in my opinion, but I don't know. I would say down the road, probably something with insurance, maybe. So maybe doing accounting as well. I don't know for sure, but yeah. So that's one of the reasons.
This week has been a whirlwind for you, Jake. I mean, you got the phone call, got the offer on Saturday night. You sat on it for a few days, didn't really let the cat out of the bag. Tuesday, you make the official announcement about reopening your recruitment. Wednesday, you make the announcement about the offer and the official visit.
Yeah.
Have you felt yourself walking around lighter? I mean, I know we've talked before, and you said you lost a lot of weight, but do you feel like you're even lighter now than you've ever been, just having this happening in your life?
Yeah, I would say for sure. It was definitely just a long couple days just announcing the decommitment and the offer. So I would say for sure, yeah, definitely feel lighter walking around.
Jake, Berm has been to probably a few more of the Ohio State recruiting camps than I have been to, but I've been to a lot of them. I've seen you there over the years, and I've seen how much you've improved and how you've changed. I'm wondering as you sit here now, going into your senior year of high school, getting ready to decide ultimately where you want to go to college, what you think of the kid the first time you showed up to an Ohio State camp, and how much different you are now compared to that kid back then.
I would say that kid freshman year was kind of soft. Didn't really know what to do that much, and then obviously now I would say I'm a lot more improved, developed more, and I just got more left to keep developing and stuff. So I would say a huge difference from freshman year to senior year showing up to camp.
One of the big things that's changed for you, Jake, is just the coaching staff at Westerville North being full of former Ohio State players. Marcus Ray from Michigan. Like, how valuable was it for you to have guys who had been through the process and guys who really understood, like, hey, you have the potential to get there. We just need to push you to this new limit. How important was it for you to have that sort of asset backing you, as opposed, now I don't mean to knock any former coaches or anything like that, but it's a different world when you have guys that have played in the NFL on your coaching staff versus guys that haven't. So what was their message when they got there, and how did they approach you differently?
They kind of just told me, like, you have the offers, you have the size, there's just a lot of stuff that you got to change as far as, just twitchiness and lateral movement wise, just all that little stuff. And definitely I would say Marcus Ray, our offensive coordinator, he really helped me the most with kind of just getting a feel for what it's like to play at a level like Ohio State or team up north where he played. So that definitely was a huge part, was Coach Ray, I would say. And then him, I know he played defense, but he's the smartest offensive guy I've ever talked with. I go to his house to do a film sometimes, and then so really those guys helped me out a lot for sure.
Do you think that you'll be able to convince his son that he needs to play at Ohio State instead of in Ann Arbor? Because I know his son is entering his freshman year, and there's some high expectations for him.
Yeah, Marquise, he's really good. He's one of the twitchiest dudes you'll see. So for sure, I'll stick on him for sure.
Jake, we have some subscribers to our show here, who we from time to time ask for questions on our show, and I asked one for this show, and there wasn't a question for you per se, but somebody did send a message to us that I wanted to pass along to you while we have you on the show here. This was from a guy named Chris Keck, who's a listener to our show and has been following your story. Now he's making some assumptions here, I will say that, so I apologize. Mm-hmm. But he wrote this in, and I just want you to hear it. He said, assuming Jake will commit to Ohio State, if you see him, can you let him know that all of the old Westerville North player alumni are super proud of him? He'd be the first Warrior to go to Ohio State on scholarship since Jeff Davidson in the early 90s. He says, we've watched a lot of folks from South and Central go to Ohio State over the years, but if Jake does it, he'd be the first in more than a generation from North, and we're proud of him for that.
That's crazy. We speaking of Jeff Davidson, we actually give out an award each year for him. He's up in our school Hall of Fame. So that means a lot, hearing that from someone for sure. It's exciting.
Has it? I mean, you and I talked a couple days ago. I know that things haven't really hit you yet. How do you find yourself going in and out of bits of oh my gosh, this is happening to me every day, or are you just trying to put it all aside and focus on process right now?
I would say so. Saturday when I got the call, I wouldn't say really. It hit me Sunday morning, and then obviously I spent Saturday, just celebrating with the family. But then it was kind of just the next morning. It was all right, well, let's get ready to go. I gotta step it up a lot more and just get ready to play. So I mean, it was a huge blessing, huge excitement, a lot of emotions. But I would say after 24 hours, I was just back, head on straight, ready to go again. So just keeping the momentum going forward and just keep working. That was kind of just my mindset.
I wanted to ask you about that, Jake. We're catching you on your way home from the gym right now. Yep. We know how much work you've put in over the last few years to be recruited by Ohio State and everywhere else. Like an offer from Louisville and commit to there to make yourself one of the better high school offensive linemen in the country in your class. Where does it go from here? I mean, you don't stop now, right? So do you ratchet it up that much more? Do you find ways to find that little bit of space to make up now as you progress into your senior year and then ultimately into college?
Yeah, like I said, I mean, it's pretty much, I'll do my training with Eric Lichter. So I think he was the strength coach under Jim Tressel at Ohio State. So I'll do a lot of speed development with him and then a lot of strength training. Plus we're starting to do a lot more recovery now. So acupuncture, cupping, stuff like that. And then obviously I'm with the team on Monday through Thursday for 6 a.m. workouts.
How hard is it? Again, you're heading into this weekend. You're not committed yet. There is, of course, the expectation. We're not gonna dance around that maybe you'll be a part of this class in the near future.
Yeah.
How do you balance the weekends, like desire to recruit other players, David Sanders, versus experiencing this for yourself? Because you know, there's a little bit of both that has to be juggled, right?
Yep. Yes, sir. I mean, I'm just going in, gonna have fun. Obviously, live 20 minutes away. I've been there a lot, so I mean, it'll be fun for just getting the family there, and then obviously recruiting other players, especially David. I think I told you this, but I've known him since freshman year. We were supposed to play in the freshman like FBU game, but I wasn't allowed to because of the OHSAA rules. But yeah, so it should be fun. I mean, we're definitely going to try and recruit those guys for sure.
The OHSSA has never made a good decision ever, so I'm not surprised to hear that they kept you from doing something that would have been enjoyable and good for you and your development.
Yes, sir.
Well,
that for a while.
Well, I think we can wrap things up there, Jake. Before Berm gets you to say something that'll get you in trouble with the OHSAA, or something that'll get him in trouble with them too. But listen, we appreciate your time. It's been really fun following your journey here. Wish you the best of luck with it. Have fun this weekend during your OB, and we look forward to seeing where you go from here.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you guys both for having me on.
Thanks, Jake. Enjoy the weekend, bud.
Yes, sir. You guys as well.
Back again on the podcast daily. Thanks again to Jake Cook for joining us. Berm, we do have some questions from our tech subscribers. I promised them I would get the answers from you. And we got a lot of offensive line questions. So I'm just going to do this. Lloyd, Will, Rich, and Cam, I see your questions. I'm going to combine them all and just say, Berm, offensive line recruiting, what's up?
I mean, we just talked to what we assume will be part 2 of the offensive line class. What's interesting to me the most is that like 2.5 months ago, there was a real thought that this class on the offensive line was going to be like 3 players. Now, the idea is 4 or 5 players, hopefully 5. Obviously, every egg in the available egg cart is on the David Sanders basket, right? Or on, in, around. It is just collapsing on the David Sanders basket. The David Sanders basket has so many eggs in it right now that the bottom of the basket has broken open and there are eggs everywhere. Eggs just everywhere. Now, again, as I said earlier in the show, like if you don't finish that this weekend, I don't know where it goes, to be honest. There are other players Ohio State has been recruiting that they're still very high on, that are very much in play. We've talked a lot about Javon McFadden from Washington, D.C. He's a guard that Ohio State likes quite a bit. They thought maybe he'd be committed by the end of this month. Unfortunately, he wanted to take some other visits. And I can't help but get this feeling that like Colorado, because of his relationship with Jordan Seaton, is going to come in November and steal that kid. It's just the sense I get. I think Ohio State is of the mindset that they present and they provide a unique opportunity for kids around the country. And if a kid who is considering Ohio State or South Carolina or Colorado can't see the value of committing to Ohio State in June and still wants to play this game, then maybe that guy is not the right fit for Ohio State. And I know people get so angry when I mention the word fit and say that, oh, this kid does not fit at Ohio State. Ohio State's offensive line, you and Austin did the show a week ago or 2 weeks ago. I mean, it's regarded as a top 10 offensive line in college football, right? It's 2 years ago, they're playing, they're a field goal away from winning a national championship with an offensive line that was a pretty good group. And you had one superstar in Paris Johnson, and you had a couple other really good players. The Buckeyes have developed pretty well on the offensive line. They do not regularly recruit and land 5-star players on the offensive line, and that's never been the case. So I don't know why all of a sudden there's an expectation that every player Ohio State lands on the offensive line has to be a 5-star. That's just not realistic. That's not realistic. You have to get the best players in the state of Ohio, which Carter Lowe is committed to Ohio State. Jake Cook, we expect to be committed to Ohio State soon. Those are the 2 best linemen in the state. And then you figure out from there where you're going. I will concede that I think Justin Fry is making some mistakes in timing when it comes to offering players a little bit too late, because he believes that if he can build solid relationships with 7 or 8 guys instead of lukewarm relationships with 28 guys, that he's got a better chance of landing those players. But the problem is when you're recruiting only 7 or 8 or 9 players, those players are the elite of the elite, and they're being recruited by Alabama. They're being recruited by Georgia. And in the case of Jackson Lloyd, the offensive tackle from Carson, California, who committed to Alabama this week, he was recruited by Kalen DeBoer and the coaching staff at Alabama for the last 2 years when those guys were in Washington. So like it's hard. I mean, they got the kid and his family on campus twice in 4 weeks from California. That's pretty good. So if you just think, oh, maybe we should have been a little bit more aggressive 6 months ago, then you have a lot longer runway to build those relationships. So there are plenty of players that they have offered. There have been surprises this month, no doubt. Henry Fanuku, the offensive tackle from Crowley High School in Texas, like him committing to Missouri out of the blue was not expected by anybody. And I don't think that relationship / recruitment is anywhere near over. So there's twists and turns that are coming. But really, for Ohio State, and I'm going to say this, and people may scoff at it, but if you have Carter Lowe and you add Jake Cook as your center, and if you can lock things up with David Sanders this weekend, whatever you do for that next spot or two is somewhat irrelevant in my mind. You're going to get a good player. It's Ohio State. You're going to find someone good, but you may not get all 5 stars, and that's never been the case. So I don't know why people think it should be now.
How like there's a little bit of there's a carryover of the frustrations from Greg Studrawa that I think Justin Fry is also kind of bearing the brunt of right now. I'm not even saying necessarily that that's unfair, because people want to see, I think, offensive line recruiting be a little more in line with other positions on the team. But like how then I hesitate to use this word, but like how much of this cycle is like a referendum on Justin Fry's recruiting chops in your mind?
I think fairly or unfairly, that's what it comes down to. But I
Yeah.
also think if Ohio State goes out and has a dominant offensive line this year, we've seen development of Josh Simmons. We've seen the guys getting better on the team. Like there are really positive things that Justin Fry has done, but it's Ohio State. You know, we say it a lot, and the coaches say it a lot. Ohio State sells itself, right? So all you have to do is really take the ball and punch it into the goal line. Like the Ohio State's going to move you down the field 90 yards basically by itself. So you have to be able to win those battles. Perry Eliana was great at getting to the 3-yard line. Could not seem to punch it in. Tony Alford, for as long as he was at Ohio State, there was a lot of really positive things that he did on the recruiting trail. One of the best relationship builders I've ever seen on the recruiting trail. But again, if you get to the 1-yard line and can't score, then it doesn't matter. And I think that Justin Fry is in that spot now. I also feel like he's being given a gift in the class of 2026.
Yeah.
So as long as he gets through this year, you have 4 or 5 players in Ohio next year that could basically make up the entire recruiting class. So, and I also don't think it's fair when we assume or when we don't give credit for guys landing players in the state, because it's still hard. Carter Lowe had offers for, I mean, he was down to basically Ohio State, Michigan, or Georgia. You had to win that battle, and people assume that just because he's in Ohio that you're going to win it. But if you don't, then you're the worst recruiter of all time. But if you do, it doesn't matter. And I think there's a bit of a weird double standard. Greg Studrawa, in my recollection, landed 2 5-star offensive linemen in the time that he was at Ohio State. Was Nick Petit-Frere and Paris Johnson, right? So, well, no, Josh Myers,
Wyatt Davis,
Harry Miller. So there's actually now, if we break down into the minutia of each of those recruitments, like I don't want to be dismissive of Greg Studrawa's work, but none of those guys committed to Ohio State for Greg Studrawa. Like,
right.
Josh Myers would have committed to Ohio State if Mickey Mouse was the head coach, and Wyatt Davis committed solely because of Urban Meyer. Ryan Day saved the Paris Johnson recruitment. Ryan Day is the one who recruited Harry Miller out of high school. Like, we can be honest about this and say that Justin Fry has to be better without completely like assuming that he's just a failure, because that's just not true.
I know that, at least from my vantage point, Ryan Day seems probably a little more intimately involved with individual recruitments, or more individual recruitments probably than most head coaches are. It's one of his strengths, I think. Do you sense from him at all like increased activity when it comes to offensive line recruiting with his involvement?
No, I mean, I think what's funny about Ryan Day, and we'll see this like in the recruitment of Justin Hill, for example. So let's deviate from the offensive line. But when Ryan Day decides that he likes a dude, like Ryan Day is going to get that guy. Like that's just the reality. They love the Sanders family. They love him. Now, does Justin Fry need the help? I don't think it's fair to say he does, but he'd also be stupid to not, accept it, or it'd be folly for us to say it doesn't matter, because the position coaches, we spend so much time telling these recruits, like, hey, you can't commit to a position coach. They're going to be gone in a year. And then if the head coach is involved, like that's the guy you want involved. So Ryan Day is not being over the top. Now we are seeing an increase, I think, in activity from Chip Kelly when it comes to offensive line. Tim Drevno being involved. So like and Mike Seleni, like it's a 4-man group right now, really. And then Ryan Day will come in and help on the finalizing of things and the final pieces. But he hasn't done any more than he did when he was the offensive coordinator, and he's done less.
Okay. All right. We'll leave the O-line talk there for now. I think we need to. There's a lot to get into with it. I think we kind of need to see where this
it can be better. Like, let's just call it what it is. It can be better, but it's not the end of the world either. It's not awful.
Right. You mentioned this player earlier, so I'll ask this question from Avery. If Jakeem Stewart reclassifies to 2025 and commits to Ohio State, are we talking about like one of the best defensive recruiting classes of all time? And he also says, like, what are the odds of that happening?
I mean, I don't know how to define the odds, but he's going to reclassify to 2025. And so the question is, how will LSU allow his family to leave the state? And I mean that like physically. Will they physically allow them, or will they be retained? Will they be tied up in their homes? I don't know what LSU would do. USC is actually a really big piece of this recruitment. Oregon's a big piece of this recruitment, and Ohio State's a big piece of the recruitment, along with LSU. Once he reclassifies, though, everyone's going to be involved. And so the relationship between Larry Johnson and Jakeem Stewart is very good. Alan Clark, Larry Johnson's assistant, is from Louisiana. Like they have very Jakeem said when he was in town earlier in the month that like they have a similar story, and like he really connects with those guys. Ohio State is playing its defensive line recruiting almost like at a distance right now, because that is looming. They know it's going to happen. So it's like it feels like they're moving slower on some other things at defensive tackle. And I hate the idea of like holding off on commitments or pushing off other guys while you wait for something to happen 5 months from now. I just think that is, generally speaking, a faulty strategy. But Larry Johnson wants Jakeem Stewart, and they were going to go to the ends of the earth to make sure they get him. So what are the odds? I don't know. 4-1, 5-1. I mean, that's probably where I would call it, right?
Pretty good. It's not bad. I take that shot. Yeah.
A 20% chance, 25% chance is. I legitimately think it's a toss-up between those teams. I don't believe that he wants to stay in Louisiana, but I have a hard time believing that LSU is going to let him or his family leave the state without physical restraints. And now, does that mean it's the best defensive recruiting class Ohio State's ever had? Yeah. I mean, do they get Justin Hill? Do they get, do they get Malik Autry, the Auburn commit who's visiting this weekend? Do they add Dorian Brew? Do they does Trey McNutt surprise everyone and commit to Ohio State in the season when I don't think he will? In those cases, then I think, yes, unquestionably, it's the best defensive recruiting class they've ever had. But if you look at like the 2021 class, it was pretty darn good. Like if you go back to 2013 was pretty good. 2002, the Bobby Carpenter, Mike DeAndrea class, AJ Hawk, etc. Like that class was great. Then we could really go back to like the mid 90s, where the 96 class with Andy Katzenmoyer and Ahmed Plummer, and it was Gary. It was a really good. They had some really good classes. So it'd certainly be up there. 20% chance.
I think people would take merely being in the conversation with those classes. You don't have to pick which one's the best. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think we talked about it earlier this week about how bizarre it is that the majority of the questions about this current Ohio State roster are on the offensive side of the ball. But if you look at the Buckeyes recruiting class right now, in the class of 2025, which is the number 1 ranked class in the country, it has 16 commitments, and the last 2 have been offensive players. So it's 10 defensive players and 6 offensive players. So it's definitely different.
Yeah, which is I think it's good. I think it's okay that Ohio State's in that position because I think you can be reasonably confident that they will close it the right way on offense. Here is a question from Evan. He wants you to play in and out on all the official visitors this week. I'm not going to make you do that,
Yeah.
but I will. I will ask you this question, assuming you're comfortable answering it. Most likely players to commit before the 4th of July,
From this weekend,
or just players Ohio State is most likely to land before the 4th of July, if there are any.
I fully expect Jordan Davison will commit somewhere before the 4th of July. I expect Dorian Moore to announce somewhere before the 4th of July. I think that Vernell Brown will announce somewhere before the 4th of July. I just combined 3 words into one. Before the 4th of July. Bodpen Miller, the recently offered wide receiver from Ontario, Ontario High School in Mansfield, Ohio, will commit before the 4th of July. I think David Sanders will be right around there. I think Jake Cook will be before then. I think that Justin Hill will announce on July 3rd. I know that for a fact. Trajan Odom, the defensive end tackle from North Carolina, will commit to Ohio State or Oregon on June 28th. Dorian Brew, I think, will be in somewhere before the 4th of July. And Brandon Finney, who visited last weekend, a defensive back out of Maryland, will commit next week. I don't know what day, but I mean, there's a lot coming. Like this is why the fact that there are a handful of schools holding up this idea of a late June signing period can just piss right off. Like all these kids are clearly committing and getting it done now so that they can focus on their senior seasons and be done with recruiting. And because some high school coaches in Alabama are concerned about, I don't even know why they would be concerned. Like it's making things easier for your team because you don't have to worry about as much recruiting during the season. But we'll see what happens. Everyone wants to, all those top players want to be done by this time next month and probably even earlier within the next 2 or 3 weeks.
I'll ask you 2 more. This can be a quick one. From Larry, who is more likely to be in this class, Dorian Moore or David Sanders?
I would probably say David Sanders just because Dorian Moore is in Texas and Ohio State is recruiting against Texas and Oregon. And those are 2 very heavy spenders on the recruiting trail. And obviously the ties to Texas are pretty deep. He's got ties now to Oregon with his former coach at Duncanville, Rashard Samples, being out there. I feel dumb picking against Brian Hartline because it doesn't make sense to do that. But I would say of those 2, I would think David Sanders because of just the fit, the need, the relationships with especially the Monica Daniels, Paris Johnson, et cetera. Like I just think that Ohio State, I really think Ohio State's going to win that one. And if they don't, I'm just going to cry for them because it's going to, the uproar online will be something.
And here's the last one. Tyler had a question, like sort of generally about official visits. He said, like, what's actually included, what gets paid for, logistics, all that stuff, how many family members can go. That's not. I'm going to twist it a little bit because you talk to a lot of these kids after they take their visits, right? I know everybody generally has a very good time on their official visits. I always think it's very funny when there are stories of like so and so had a great time at school X. Like no kidding, but and you don't do that, thankfully.
That's why I stopped doing it.
Yeah, but I am wondering if in your conversation, I guess quickly to answer, like basically everything's paid for, Tyler. I believe they can bring like their parents, and like
Parents and like I think you can bring up to 4 people. So like 2 parents and a sibling, or
a sibling.
2 parents and an uncle or whatever, like or a grandparent. Like I think it's 4 total people is what I understand.
Lodging, airfare, meals, all that stuff is paid for by the school. But I mentioned this question, Brim, to ask you, like, is there a commonality in your conversations with players as they come off of their official visits with Ohio State in terms of like anything that seems to be resonating with these players on these visits? Is there something that you've picked up on that like Ohio State is doing really well this month on its official visits that is positioning them well in these recruitments?
This is something that because we've talked a lot about Aaron Dunstan and her departure in the last 2 weeks, but Ohio State is as organized and as personalized as any team in the country when it comes to their official visits. Like, yes, you have a general standard like idea of what you want to get across every trip, but every single recruit, every moment of their trip is personalized for them. So there are no generic meetings. There are no like, well, this is our NIL meeting. It's generic. This is our like it is everything is personalized for the individual recruit, and that is something that the Buckeyes do really well. You know, we the college football is such a copycat world. I mean, 6 years ago, all you ever heard about from everyone who visited Ohio State was Real Life Wednesdays. Real Life Wednesdays. Now everyone has their own program that's copied it. But so now it's just about like the personal touches and making sure that players, when you're bringing in a dozen official visitors like Ohio State is this weekend, like there is a tendency to just lump everyone together and say, okay, everyone follow me. And you're just on a tour. And it's like it's like road trip. Remember when they're at the college or is that road trip? And they're at the college and everyone's just, oh, neat. Like there's none of that. Like it's all personalized. And one thing that I keep hearing from parents is how much they enjoy like Saturday evening and spending social time with the coaches and being out on the city with those guys and getting to know the coaches' families. That's something Ohio State does very, very well. Like every coach's wife, their children, like is around, and that is something that is unique.
So is that like a Saturday night, like players with players, parents with adults? Is that how they break it up?
Yep.
Okay. Nice. That sounds like a nice time. I wouldn't mind hitting the town with Ryan Day and the boys.
You got 17 years, Bill, till George is ready.
That's right. Yeah. I was talking with who was the kid, Nick Evers' little brother who was
Drew
camping.
Evers.
Drew Evers was camping last week, and I was talking to his mom, and she's like, "Which one of these out here is yours?" And I said, "My son is 17 months. He's a little early." And she said, "He'll be out here in 2 years. They start this process really early on."
Real early, getting earlier and earlier. And George is going to be like 6'4" as a 5-year-old. So
he might be. He's pretty big now. We'll see. Maybe he could be a 5-star offensive lineman that Ohio State lands one day. We'll see. We'll see where it goes.
I don't know. I heard his dad likes Penn State.
I like anywhere that will pay for his education. I won't be picky. I won't be picky about that. That is close by too, because I don't want to get on an airplane. So maybe it will be Ohio State. We'll see. We have a lot of time to figure that out.
Colleges are not going to exist in 17 years.
I know. That's what I keep. That's actually what I keep telling people when they're like, "He's going to play college football." I was like, "College football's what are you talking about? We're going to be on the moon by the time he's 18."
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see what happens. All right. Thank you, Bern. We appreciate your recruiting insight here on the podcast daily. It was basically just an episode of talking stuff, but
it's okay. We need, I mean, I want to do more episodes of talking stuff, but just between travel and just, time, I mean, it is not easy. I will say, keep your eyes on the clock today. I don't know, sometime in the afternoon, there should be some positive news for Ohio State. So just, you never know what's going to happen in the world of Ohio State football recruiting. Big weekend. Everyone's getting to town. Can't wait. Again, as a reminder, and I told people this on Talking Stuff when Andrew and I did it on Tuesday night, probably going to be Tuesday before we have a next episode of Talking Stuff, because it is my anniversary weekend, because of the concert on Saturday, because of graduation party that is happening as soon as I get back into town on Sunday. We'll do our best. Maybe we'll recap some of it on the daily on Monday, but we will not have like a full-on episode of recruiting stuff until Tuesday.
Yeah, we'll see if we can't squeeze some in on Monday morning. But like, if we can't, people, it's a little patience never hurt anybody. Tuesday night, talking stuff. You'll find it there. Until then, thank you, Bern. Thanks, Jake Cook, for joining us here on the podcast daily. We hope you guys enjoy your weekend, and we'll talk to you next week.